It is now my great pleasure and honor to introduce the honorary chair of this 30th induction ceremony, 2005 inductee, Hillary Rodham Clinton.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It is absolutely a thrill to be back here in this fabled auditorium in Geneva, in upstate New York, with all of you. Jen, thank you for the work you've done. Thanks to Betsy Fantone and the board for your steadfast support of the National Women's Hall of Fame. And thanks to our terrific governor, Kathy Hochul, who has, in a short period of time, really done so much to demonstrate leadership and grit as she was speaking about the inductees. You know, it is a thrill for me to be amongst all of them, and I congratulate each and every one of today's exceptional inductees. And their stories strike a deep chord with me because I know none of us is here on our own. We are bound together by history, by shared struggle, by hope, by overcoming disappointments and setbacks, by resilience and persistence. And yes, indeed, by the women who gathered here in this space 125 years ago, but also the women who gathered in Seneca Falls. Think about that. As we just heard, 300 hardy souls, mostly women, but a few intrepid men, including Frederick Douglass. And yes, in a time where what they were doing had absolutely no precedent anywhere in the world. I always used to say, as I traveled around the state as senator, there was just something in the water up here in the Finger Lakes region that inspired these women and the men who supported them to meet together on that July afternoon and continue over a couple of days to hammer out the unbelievable idea that women had rights and that those rights were the same as their fathers and husbands and brothers and sons. You know, the Declaration of Sentiments, hammered out just 10 miles from here, really stands the test of time. It was inspirational and also practical. Many of the women who gathered to embark on the conversations and the debates did not see it come to fruition. But they understood they had to start the journey together. I was privileged on July 16th, 1998, 150 years after the first Women's Rights Convention, to come to Seneca Falls as First Lady to commemorate the occasion. And we gave speeches in the afternoon sun out on the high school playing field, and the stands were filled because there was a sense of history and pride that what had started so long ago meant that progress was possible and we could celebrate it while continuing to fight for more. And then in August of 2003, I participated in an event for the National Women's Hall of Fame, and I was absolutely certain that helping the Hall of Fame to not just induct amazing women, but also to represent the history of the women's rights movement in our country was not only the right thing to do, but a smart thing as well, because it would draw more people here to this region of the state where they too would learn the stories about these extraordinary women. I was honored in October of 2005 to return to be inducted myself. And then thank you. And then the following year, in 2006, I helped to host a reception at Zuzu's coffee shop to receive a briefing about the plans for the future site of the Hall of Fame, namely the Seneca Knitting Mill. Now, for me, seeing the progress that was being made and actually envisioning sometime in the future to have the National Women's Hall of Fame right here in this part of our state was so exciting. And I knew how much attention was paid to Cooperstown, New York, where the Baseball Hall of Fame is. And I remember saying, there are more women than baseball players. And I love baseball, grew up playing softball and even hardball, but I have to say, I cannot wait to attend the grand opening of the Women's Hall of Fame in the Knitting Mill. The other thing I had the honor of helping to do was teaming up with the late, great Congresswoman Louise Slaughter. She and I introduced bipartisan legislation. Yes, we used to do that a lot, bipartisan legislation, to establish the Votes for Women's History Trail. And finally, that legislation passed and was signed into law, and the National Park Service was authorized to help establish the trail. But we still need to work on getting the funding that is necessary to attract people to know more about what happened at that incredible moment in time back in the 19th century. As we celebrate the history that is happening on this stage and remember all of the efforts that led to it, I think we are, as the governor so compellingly said, called to recommit ourselves to the continued fight for women's rights and full equality. All over the world, and yes, right here in the United States, there is a growing pushback against women's advancement and progress. And sadly, it is often amplified by social media, which has a tendency to attract attention by being controversial and dramatic, and that includes going after women who are in the public sphere, attacking them, undermining them, and frankly, launching all kinds of misogynistic and sexist assaults on them. So as the tide has shifted toward more authoritarianism in a number of places, more nationalism, more populism, very often the first targets are leaders who are promoting women's full equality. I was just with the First Lady of Ukraine, who along with her husband are so bravely helping to tell the story of what is happening in their country because of unchecked, horrific aggression. I was also just with a group of Afghan women who themselves have escaped the Taliban's control, but who understand painfully what it is like for the girls and women who remain, particularly the girls and young women who are desperate to go to college, desperate to go to high school, desperate to get an education, and who are being denied for no reason other than the fact that they are women and girls. The pandemic pushed a lot of women out of the workforce and unraveled decades of hard-fought progress all over the world. And then, as the governor has said, the Supreme Court revoked a right it had granted women when it overturned Roe v. Wade. I'm deeply worried about the impact of that decision on women's lives. And I'm also concerned that we are retreating as a nation from trying to figure out how to have this big, inclusive, pluralistic democracy that was at the core of what Seneca Falls was about. It saddens, and yes, it angers me that my granddaughter, Charlotte, may grow up in a world where she has fewer rights than my daughter, Chelsea. But that also motivates me to keep going, keep fighting, keep speaking out and standing up. And I know I'm in good company, not only with the inductees, but with all of you. I'm often asked, well, how do I feel about what's happening in our country? And, you know, I used to give kind of a long, frankly, kind of wonkish answer, where I went down the pluses and the minuses and said what was happening and what we could do about it. And, you know, I could see eyes glazing over after a while. And now I'm much more likely to quote a dear friend of mine who we lost too soon, Secretary Madeleine Albright. As her life reminded us, and as she told us, often with great humor, having escaped from the Nazis with her family, then having escaped from the communists with her family, and then having to really work hard to get a degree in international relations, get a PhD, go to work on behalf of the causes and concerns that she deeply cared about. So she would answer like this when she was asked, well, there's so many terrible things happening. I just mentioned two of them, Ukraine and Afghanistan. Are you an optimist or a pessimist? And she would look with those twinkly eyes of her, often wearing a big pin on her shoulder, and she would say, I'm an optimist who worries a lot. So let's be optimistic, but let's put ourselves to work to overcome the worries that we face. Thank you all, and congratulations again.